You know the difference between a good organization and a great one? It's the leadership system. In the best organizations, it's the engine that drives success. This is Coach What Matters. We are driven by a passion to help you unlock the full potential of your organization, ensuring every decision is aligned with your core purpose and fueled by powerful business metrics. I'm your host, Leslie Szymborski, COO and co-founder of Coach What Matters. And joining me is Cesar Flores, CEO and founder of Coach What Matters. Cesar is an executive coach specializing in harnessing the power of leadership and alignment for transformational growth. Hi there, everybody. Thank you for joining Coach What Matters in our podcast. And today we're going to talk about using AI more wisely. And so many of us are integrating AI into our daily life, mostly probably to create more effective messaging, to brainstorm an idea. Maybe you're making images using AI, but I venture to guess that most of us are sort of at an editing level and making our life easier in the day-to-day. And so that's good, right? That's good. We're becoming more efficient. We're writing more clearly. And for me, it's super helpful for most of what I'm doing. So if you're in that camp, you might enjoy this podcast because we're going to talk about some of the challenges that come along with using AI, some of the pitfalls that we've learned through experience and through our in-depth sort of interrogation of what the tool can do and the different AI agents, what they make available. And so there are risks and pitfalls. And so today we want to share some of those with you. Some that we found we'll be talking about bias in AI. We'll talk about hallucinations, mirroring, the way that it mirrors the user, and the dimensionality of it, the one-dimensional nature of AI versus the human, and how a human compares to some of what AI can do. So today I have with me Cesar Flores. This is our 7th podcast together, so that is fun. Hopefully we're getting better, and today is our first podcast that is on camera, so that's also exciting for both of us.
Yeah, I'm very excited to be here. This topic is great. There's a lot of misconceptions about AI, so can't wait to dig into it. This is going to be awesome.
Yeah. So for you, Cesar, you have more than the normal person. So my use case is very much probably every person, every man, kind of how we're integrating it into our daily activities. But you have really learned quite a lot. If anyone has not seen Cesar's videos on LinkedIn or Instagram, you should go see them because he's been very creative in using what he's learned through video creation. You also went so far as to create more than one program using AI. You're not a developer or a programmer, not a computer science major. So I believe you were an accounting major, correct?
That's correct.
Not your forte necessarily to start writing programs, but you went ahead, you took on that challenge. And so you are well equipped to talk about what you've seen and learned. And you're here to share some of those learnings with our audience.
Yeah, absolutely. I was very excited to get into it, the hype behind it, and also to test out the different models and how they perform in different scenarios. So, the test that they do, and we'll get into this a little bit later, but the test they do in the labs is vastly different than our uses and things like that. And also it depends a lot on your experience with these models and how you can use them and really take advantage of them. But again, even with that, there's a lot of misconceptions around, how to use them, what are the right prompts, how do you get it to help you and get the most value out of it. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's all good, but you have to keep in mind what it can do, and more importantly, how do you stay out of trouble.
Yeah. So let's start with some of the trouble, because that's why we're here. We want to help people like look out for these things that we've learned. So let's start with mirroring. What what does mirroring mean to you, and then how do you see that playing out in an artificial way?
Yeah, a lot of the stuff that AI uses, it wants to learn the most about you. The way that you write your prompts, uh, the way that you even search, it starts to learn a lot about what you're doing. It starts to also uh, magnify your ideas. It starts to almost, if you speak to a body language expert, for example, one of the things that they teach you is to mirror who you're talking to in order for them to like you. That's what happens. And that's exactly what AI is doing.
Hmm.
In that mirroring process, it also complements you into the ideas that you're doing. So it starts to artificially inflate the way that you feel about AI, and the more that you do it, of course, it starts to almost become an echo chamber with you on the things that you're putting in there. This becomes worse the longer you have a single conversation. So some people chat with AI over hours. Well, essentially, what you end up doing is chatting with yourself over that time. And
Chatting
it
with your most
happens,
intelligent self.
yeah. It starts to subtly really just be, yes, it does have access to information. Yes, it can answer your questions, but it's answering the questions in what you almost expect it to do, and almost expect it to give you back the answers. So it's extremely important to be aware of that and be cognizant of that, especially the longer the conversation goes on. It starts to go uh, into that rabbit hole with you in the mirror and becoming an echo chamber, just like any social media channel or any social space that you're in. It literally starts to do similar things, not the same, but similar, because AI still has access to information. It can still deduct and reason, but it is a form of echoing what your
So
thoughts are.
So if I'm a user, you started with as you write your prompt, right? So first, explain to people briefly what the prompt is, because we weren't, most of us adults did not learn about prompting when we were in any kind of school. And then second, how do you write your prompt so that you get away from sort of an echoed or a mirrored sort of response from the
Yeah,
AI?
a lot of people use it almost like search. So, that's how they do the prompt. They'll say something like, tell me what the weather is in such and such a city, or recommend the top 5 hotels in the city if you're traveling, things like that. Really, that's not the best prompting or the way to use prompts. One of the things that you need to do is really start with a role-based approach. So if you are a travel person, you want to say something like, as a traveler, I want to be able to experience ABC. And that tells the AI to put itself into that space,
Mhm.
into your likes and dislikes. And based on what you like and that, it can give you a better recommendation for what your taste is, not a generic kind of searching aspect that you would do on a regular search. But to go back to the second part of the question is, well, how do you know it's telling you the truth, or
Right.
it's not echoing back what you want to hear? This is also becomes like, I gave a simple example of travel, but you could see how this stuff can become, especially if you're coding, can become troublesome. right? So what you want to do is challenge the ideas that it's giving you. What are the advantages and disadvantages of what you just recommended?
Mm.
Tell me why I shouldn't follow that recommendation, right? And it starts to give you a bigger picture of the pros and cons of the recommendations. In coding, what AIs tend to do is sometimes they over complicate the structure of code. So one of the things that it may do is it may over architect an application for a simple use case, as the example. So what you want to be able to ask it is this the most efficient way to develop this application? How would an architect look at that? How would an engineer in a different space look at that architecture? The pros and cons. And then the other thing that is not talked about a lot in the social media space when you have like content creators talking about AI is that most of them use more than one model. As a matter of fact, I don't know anyone who is doing coding that doesn't use more than one model to code.
And tell me what you
Um,
mean by more than one model. What are examples of different models?
yeah, so for example, like they use Grok and ChatGPT and Claude. There's usually 3 or 4 that are used in order to kind of give you the best of all worlds.
Mm.
Now, even though, depending on the time of year or even the day or the latest release, you could have ChatGPT on top. I think Claude just came up with another one, Sonnet, so it scores a little bit higher on the benchmarks. So at any given time, you can have one model that outperforms the other one slightly, a little bit. But what people miss is that the longer you are in the chat with that model, the more that it erodes the quality that it gives you, and it starts to take shortcuts into it,
Mm.
into the answer that it gives you. The reason why is because of compute power. It does what models, or the way that the models operate, is they want to give you the fastest answer possible without too much compute power, because compute power is what costs these companies money, right? So it starts to take shortcuts, and there are things out there like prompts that say think longer about the answer, or uh, or run your answer through a different set of filters or steps. But those things also don't guarantee the best answer, or don't guarantee that you're going to get the right information. So what you want to be able to do is have checks and balances in this. But compute power is, especially when you're doing complex problem solving, compute power is the most detrimental part of the answers, or what leads to incorrect answers in what the model gives you. And that's that's something that is not widely communicated to the general audience, right? So because a lot of the cases that you run into are the simple examples that I gave you. People are using it like search,
Yeah.
right? That doesn't require a lot of compute power, but the model, will also try to take shortcuts in complex answers along the way with you. So you really have to watch out for that, and that's where errors can happen. And these errors, when you're coding, can develop extreme security flaws within your code base. So that's the problem with just taking what the model gives you at face value.
Yeah. So you mentioned having multiple models open or using. Is it necessary to have multiple models? Like if you're your everyday user, if you're our user listening, do I need to be familiar with Claude, with Grok? Do I need all of those? And I'm probably not writing a program. Let's be honest. Like the normal person out there is probably not writing technology, would you still recommend that they familiarize themselves with these different models?
No, I think, if you're writing a simple website, there's no need for that. I think what you want to do, though, is challenge the ideas here and there that it's giving you, right?
Yeah.
Especially around performance of the site and things like that. The ready-made sites that a lot of people produce are really cookie cutter templates, right?
Hmm.
That they have, and those are not a big deal. They're easy, but you also, what you want to do is, the more complex you get, yes, if you're writing an application, yes, I think you do need checks and balances. In the coding world, we have separation of duties, right? So the person that writes the code doesn't check the code to make sure that it's valid, right?
Right.
And before you promote it to the next environment. So I would utilize the same basic principles, right, of separation of duties to
Okay.
have these checks and balances, right? Now, if you are dealing with you know private information in your app, you definitely want to have checks and balances. If you are dealing with financial information, you do want to have checks and balances. It is critical that you don't expose security flaws when you're dealing with information that is potentially private or critical. So you do want to have checks and balances.
Yeah. So I think some of what you're saying maybe is leaning into hallucinating, AI hallucinating, which, I mean, completely foreign concept to almost all of us until maybe recently, or maybe not at all. But tell us what you mean by a hallucination in AI.
Yeah, this is a hard thing to describe because it's a human term, right? That we're applying to a compute, uh, and I think of it also like, how does AI reason? You know,
Mm.
and the definition of how it reasons, it's very difficult to describe because there's a lot of unknowns. Um, and into that. And when even engineers, prompt engineers, or the people that develop these models, they can't really describe, and this is the scary part, of how it reasons. They could tell you the things that went into it, but the way that it reasons is the sum of all parts, right? So
Mm.
imagine, the best way to look at it is, on human terms, is if I was looking at my hand, and I was to describe my hand, and that's all I could describe, you cannot reason my whole body together, right? So the sum of all parts is what we're trying to describe in reasoning. The same thing with hallucinations, and it's not talked about enough because in some cases they consider it a small percentage of the time that it happens. It could literally give you the wrong answer, and it doesn't know that it's giving you the wrong answer.
Yeah.
And that is the hallucination part of it. How often does it happen? And the answer is, it depends, or unknown, if you want to, be a purist about it. But I could tell you that the longer you go with a conversation, the likelihood of it happening is greater. So it could be that it repeats itself. It gives you an answer to something that it gave you 2 minutes ago.
Yes.
And you're like, well, I did not ask you that question. I
Yeah.
asked you a different question. That is probably the most prominent side effect that we see, but it
Yeah.
happens at deeper levels. And this is the problem when you get into complex issues. You don't run the model once, you run it twice, right? 3 times, 4 times, to ensure that it's giving you the right answer.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the other thing that, and this is not like made too public, right? In hallucinations, what percentage of the time does your AI model hallucinate? Unknown, right? But in tests, they give you a score, right? But again, when are those tests run? And are they run in the same environment that you and I are using it?
Hmm.
That's the other part. When these labs get a model, they get it very early on in the release process to test. Well, what that means is that they have a lot more compute power on that model, which means it's as good as it's going to get.
Oh, so you're saying if I'm who makes Claude? It begins with an A.
OpenAI, Anthropic.
Anthropic, yeah. So they're creating their model. They're doing their quality assurance testing. It's working great. They've got all the compute power like possible on that test, and so everything's hunky dory. But then I go to use it from my home computer. It's got to go across the internet, and depending on how much I pay for or how much they have sitting there in their server farm, like how
Both.
who has the compute power?
Yeah, it's both, and it also depends on the complexity of your question, of how it's routed, but it also depends on how many people are using it at that time, right? So
Okay.
think about the millions of
Part
people
of
that
a
are
system. You're part of a
correct.
system, and you get in line basically, and sometimes you have 18 questions for the attendant, and sometimes you have one. um,
Yeah.
and how many people are in line, and yeah, how tired the agent might be after a busy day.
Yeah, and this happens at light speed, right? So there is no, um, these are all the different variables that go into it. And of course, we're talking about, we're down in the rabbit hole now, but those are the different things that are not advertised or readily available to us,
Mhm.
and frankly, very difficult to measure, even if we tried, right?
Yeah.
But being aware of the model and why it's doing what it's doing, it's extremely important, and not taking it just at whatever it gives you. It may be correct in the 90th percentile, but it's that 10% in those complex use cases that could be detrimental, right? So, I put out a simple example in one of the videos of telling an AI to water a plant. Well, it's going to water the plant forever unless you give it a different parameter as to when to stop, right? And that is a very simple way of describing it. But there's all these guardrails too that go into it when they program a model, so you don't get in trouble. But there's bad actors out there also, right? So there's people that are dedicated to how do you hack ChatGPT, and there is, uh, as far as I know, there is no model that can't be hacked. Absolutely none. So even today, the models that are coming out, there's ways to get around it, either through a storytelling mode or through a specific prompt that takes shortcuts to what it's trying to do and the way that it reasons. And I don't foresee um, that being overcome in the next 2 to 3 years. I think it's going to take a long time and expertise and maturity in the models to be able to get to that spot.
So it's up to the user to be aware.
Absolutely.
And what you're saying is uh, create. It's a good practice to create sort of a counterpoint to the prompt. I mean, I've seen it. I've seen the hallucination that you're talking about. And for me, as a regular user, um, what I see is exactly almost as you described. I've been like following a pattern of questions, trying to get an outcome through adjustments to my prompts or whatever. And all of a sudden, the response is the response from a question that was, way up here an hour ago. And literally, it's like you're having a discussion with someone and they stop listening and they go back to like, can I have a glass of water? Well, I gave you a glass of water like an hour ago and you haven't drank it. But I'd like a glass of water. And it's like talking to someone who is literally just not listening to you. Um, so yeah, so there's that hallucination part. And So you're saying to get the most reliable answer in a sort of working situation, right? Because then, like, what do you do when the hallucination just stops listening to you? What's your How do you solve that?
Yeah, that's where you have to reset the conversation, right? One of the other things that is not uh, publicized is how it works with your browser,
Mm,
right? So it does utilize your browser to understand. Up until now, ChatGPT is working on this more, but to memorize things about you, right? Memory is important.
mhm,
So, well, how does it do that? You know, it utilizes your browser data and
mm,
things to be able to do that. Now, how exactly it does that, it's a little bit of like secret sauce, to them. And they don't publicize that either of how it uses your browser data. So one of the things that I would do is clear your browser history and your cache and all that, and reset it completely in order for you to enter into that conversation fresh. Now, the downside to that is it doesn't recall everything
right.
you've asked it, right? But that is the best way to do it. But also beware of your browser history, is what I would say.
Yeah. I know, again, like it's so very flattering while you're using these tools. You have the best ideas. That's a great thought. Thank you for asking. Oh, it was really smart of you to ask me that. It's constantly complimenting the user, and the fact that it remembers, like you said, it has a memory of what you've done. I have a couple different projects I work on, and it'll ask me, like, is this for this project or that project? Or can I do anything more to help you with this project? And it names it, even though it's maybe a different day. So yeah, it's interesting the way that it like brings you in, it draws you in. That mirroring, I think that you were talking about before, is so effective. And I think like psychologically, it's incredible how they've. I mean, it's product stickiness, right? Like it remembers me, it knows me, it knows why it already knows my mission, and it's helpful, and it really does draw you in. Um, One of the things I do, I don't know if this will help people, but I'll ask it a question, get my answer, and then if I can tell it's just like a little too rosy, I will like you said, and I'm just maybe solidifying your points before, but I'll ask it to give me the counterpoint. Like, I have this job offer. This is what it looks like. How would you negotiate? And it gives me, these five things. It like analyzes the offer, tells me that's hooey, they should, this is insulting, and it's going to give me what I want to hear, right? But then at the same time, now I'm the employer. I'll change my prompt. I'm from the employer standpoint. Where are their best negotiating points? And so, there's different tricks, but always, I guess, be the wiser of the either the computer or the human, right? We should be the wiser. So then, how about bias? Like how do we detect bias? And maybe it's a little bit to what you were already saying, but do you have any examples of where you've seen bias? Maybe.
You have to be careful of the words that you use. So, for example, if you say, I want you to optimize, it's going to bias towards that definition of optimize. Does it mean that it's going to bias towards shortcuts? Potentially, right? So you have to be explicit about what you're asking the model to do. Also, the other thing I mentioned about compute power and this stuff, if you're using a free model, the chances of it taking a shortcut versus a paid plan increases tremendously, right? So those are the things that you have to watch out for. It doesn't behave the same, even though people think it does, on compute. And compute is where the best answers come from, right? That it takes the whole spectrum. The best way to test this out is actually some sort of research document that you're doing, right? If you have a free plan or a friend that has a free plan versus a pay plan, compare the prompts. Go in there and check it out. Some do better, some do a little bit less variance, right? But you are going to get different answers. Now, if you compare it across Grok and ChatGPT or Claude or DeepSeek or any of the other ones, it's going to be vastly different. And you'll know, but even within the same categories, you're going to get it. You're going to get different answers. Also, some paid plans have different models, so in the premium plans, you could get a better model that is not available in the lower free price plans. These biases tend to come from the words that you're using, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and it also deducts the kind of person you are. So if you're consistently looking for art, design, things of that nature, is going to be different than if you're looking for Jeep parts, right? For a car, for example. It starts to deduct the kind of person it's interacting with. And that is the other piece, right? So if I'm a person that's consistently looking for car parts, as my example,
Mm-hmm.
and I switch over to search for art, it is going to take it a little bit to kind of answer my question about art, because then it's going to start like, wait, did this person change? Or is this the same person? Whereas if you're consistently looking for art, it's going to take shortcuts and give you answers quicker, right? So biases are built into this model. And again, in my theory, it has to do with compute.
Hi there. I hope you enjoyed the first half of the Coach What Matters podcast, episode 7 on Wiser AI. More to come in a second half. But in the meantime, please add your thoughts to the comment section on how you might be using AI in your everyday life and your work life. Check our website, coachwhatmatters.com, for previous podcast episodes, our blog, and to request a free consultation from our coaches. Remember to follow us so that you never miss an episode. And until next time, remember to engage with what matters most.